That's what I thought, an hour and a half.
I thought I heard something.
Okay, thank you.
Should note that the abandoned corridor, Petersburg to just inside North Carolina, that is one place in Virginia the speeds could go up to 110, if not more. CSX has a right to run freight there, but they don't have any plans to. So with our agreements with CSX, that maximum achievable speed is well above the 90 that we have on the DC to Richmond corridor. So talking about time savings, an hour to an hour and a half, it could be significant time savings, especially if the speeds are going faster. And the new Amtrak train sets that are dual mode, that you don't have to, you can run on the electric north of Washington DC or diesel south. Those will be able to go up to 110, if not faster.
Has North Carolina made any commitment that they want to go into Main Street Station, or they just want to do Ettrick to Staples Mill?
We're in discussions with them. I think they want to do what makes sense. We know there needs to be a lot of improvements in that segment one, if you will, to get into Main Street Station.
Right.
So she's referring to the fact that some of our trains go around Richmond near the Powhite Parkway, if you've been down that way, into Staples Mill. And to get into Main Street Station, you have to come up more or less across the James River, straight from the south. The Richmond to Raleigh plans are Main Street to Main Street, meaning the Main Street Station down there. But I think we're both pragmatic, us in North Carolina, that if there could be some shorter term solutions to go around Richmond, if CSX allows, because we don't own the A line, not the S line, but the A line around Richmond. We own rights to the S line that goes across the James River. So we have more rights there to construct, but that doesn't mean we can't work with CSX.
I just wanted to share my concerns about North Carolina.
Like the problem that exists from Main Street Station around to Parham Road or to the terminal now, it's very slow.
Yes.
And it's very limited right of way. And there are a lot of small bridges that will need to be improved in order to carry the traffic. And that's why the A line is the one that North Carolina prefers that we would use, because it's straight through and it's quicker.
But you're going to do the 30% design, which would be Main Street to Main Street.
Main Street to Main Street.
Right. And then the other would be another discussion.
Yes. Well, and we don't need as many improvements to go in the A line around that's existing track now that service is running. Whereas South Richmond to point south, there's no passenger service on that now until you get to, as you know, the Centralia.
Right. Thank you.
So that was actually
Oh, okay.
question right on time.
Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
The speed caught my attention, but the potential for speed there, just because buddy just came back from Korea and went around a lot by train. I was just like, hey, bro, what's the max speed you were traveling at? And he was like, 190, like it was nothing. Are there any other passenger rail service corridors that are doing 90 or higher that you mentioned?
In this area, no.
Okay.
You have Northeast corridors doing some. There's some DJ knows this too. I think some in the Michigan area.
Yeah.
California, Texas have plans.
Out west, yeah.
But in this area, no. So this would be one of the first higher speed, high speed corridors to be able to tap from Petersburg down to just inside North Carolina border. To be able to go 110 miles per hour would be significant.
Yeah, I was just thinking how we further distinguish our capability here. Okay, thank you.
That was one of the parameters on the high-speed rail that we put together. Congress doesn't classify 90 and under as high speed. It's got to be over that in order to be classified as high speed and get the funding that they've qualified for it.
Yeah, 110 is often that mark as well, that people see the high speed as well.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Right, I think, you're,
Rolling back for Jeff.
Good.
yes. So next up is Franconia Bypass. And we've got Jeff Pelletier and Jeremy. Are you going to, or are you? Okay, after. Welcome.
Thanks, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Jeff Pelletier. I'm a Senior Director of Projects for the Engineering and Construction team. I'm relatively new to the authority. I joined in June. My primary responsibility is to oversee our projects in the Northern Virginia and DC area that are not Long Bridge project related. And one of the ones we wanted to update the board on today is the Franconia-Springfield Bypass and the CNGC, or Construction Manager General Contractor Procurement, that's been ongoing this year. But before we dig into or dive into the bypass project and CNGC, I do want to zoom out a little bit and orient you to the Franconia corridor. I know it's been brought up a couple times in the meeting today, but it is important to phase one of the TRB program, and it's where the bypass is made. The corridor that you see off to the right here, it starts just south of the AF interlocking in Alexandria, continues through the Franconia-Springfield VPRA metro station, through the Newington neighborhood, and terminates just south of Lorton. If we're using roadways as our milestone or our landmarks, we're just south of the Capitol Beltway in the Franconia-Springfield area. We run parallel to I-95 and just south of Lorton Road. We have three major projects going on in this area with our partners, ourselves, VPRA, VRE, CSX, and they're all, like I said, they're all key to the TRB program. They're all in design right now, and they're all scheduled to start construction in the next 12 to 18 months. The first one I want to talk about is the Franconia-Lorton third track. Again, I know that's come up a few times in the meeting today. This project, the design and construction, is led by CSX. It's being funded by us, VPRA. We are also doing the engineering, the environmental planning, the permitting, and the right-of-way acquisition. And the project itself is pretty much self-explanatory. It's a new third mainline track running the entire 6 mile corridor, the Franconia corridor. It includes improving and replacing drainage throughout the corridor, some wayside upgrades, as well as expanding and replacing bridges in 4 locations. We have Newington Road, Acton Creek, Powhig Creek, and Lorton Road. And in the case of Newington Road, which you see here, and I know Mike showed a picture of this earlier in the board meeting, we're replacing the original 1905 structure, which is 1 vehicle lane, and we're expanding that span to allow VDOT to construct 2-way traffic for vehicles and for pedestrians. So there's multimodal benefits beyond just the rail capacity. When we expand these bridges, we're accommodating not just the future or the third track for the project, but also a future 4th track, which could come in another iteration or phase of the TRB program. The next project in the corridor is the Franconia-Springfield Station Improvements Project by VRE. They're leading design and construction. Currently, the station operates off of 1 platform, the east platform, which you see down at the bottom of the diagram there, the plan view of the station. With the third track and bypass project coming on board, it's going to become a 2-platform station. So the project will expand and extend the east and west platforms, which you see in the purple there, to allow both platforms to operate and both platforms to accept 8-car trains. So when trains come in there, they'll be able to board and alight using all the doors on 8-car trains, which is great for operations, obviously great for passengers for their orientation. The other key part of the station improvements project is with that third track coming, which you see on the top graphic here, that east platform becomes an island. So what the project is also going to be doing is building a pedestrian tunnel off of that east platform to maintain that connectivity with the neighborhoods east of the rail corridor, and to also connect to a cul-de-sac on Barrett Road that's used currently as a Kiss-Bride drop-off point for VRE and the metro station. This project is scheduled to start in late summer, fall of next year. And then we have the Franconia-Springfield Bypass. This is the project that we as VPRA are designing and constructing. Again, I think it's been brought up a few times today, but it's important to understand how the passenger corridor to DC operates. North of Franconia, these passenger stations are on the west side of the corridor. They operate on west platforms. And as we go from Franconia south to Richmond, those passenger platforms are on the east side. And when passenger trains, either going northbound or southbound, have to make that move, they are basically doing a crossing movement within the current 2-track corridor. which stops trains in any direction, whether they're freight or passenger, and causes a bottleneck. What the bypass project is going to do, it's going to do that crossing maneuver by flying the passenger trains over the two tracks and making that movement without needing that conflict or without having those stoppages, which is really critical to the, like I said, the phase one of TRV, to opening up that capacity and that service flexibility that phase one is going to bring. To get a little bit closer and look at the bypass by the numbers, it really is a significant project. The footprint of the bypass covers 1.8 miles of the corridor. The bridge itself is just under a mile long. We're going to be installing 8,000 feet of third track along the bypass, and we're, like the other bridges in the third track corridor, we're going to be designing and constructing it to accept or to accommodate a future fourth track. And aside from all these numbers, what this rendering, this overhead view of this rendering shows is one of the challenges that we're working through right now in the project, which was, even though we're just outside of DC and just outside of Alexandria, the real estate and the footprint of this project is in a pretty secluded and highly wooded area that doesn't have a lot of easily accessible and readily available construction access points. So that's something we're working on right now.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So that kind of surprises me. All of that wooded area. What is that? Is that
on the southern part of the bypass? This is Loysdale Park, which is a park within the Fairfax County Parks Authority. Off to the west, it's some privately owned property as well as some conservation property that the Parks Authority owns. So
it's a lot of undeveloped wooded property.
it is, but we're trying to stay within the footprint of the existing CSX corridor as much as possible, minimize our right-of-way acquisition and the environmental impact of the project. This is another view, a rendering of what the bypass would look like in its final configuration. This does a good job of showing what the operational intent of the bypass is, which is to have those passenger trains fly over the CSX traffic, which is in the two ground level tracks. In this case, it'd be a VPRA commuter rail train. This is a movement that can't happen today. This movement causes trains to stop in all directions. The flyover opens up that ability to move trains seamlessly across the corridor.
Can I put out one other thing in the picture? You'll notice there's only one track in the bypass because there's 3 tracks on either side. But we're building this, also places like Newington Road, to allow for actually an extra track to be added in the future. The long-term goal of our Transport Rail in Virginia is to have 4 tracks, at least down to Spotsylvania, which is the end of the VPRA territory, because that's where 70 plus trains are. So we'll take opportunities here at Newington Road to build a new bridge widener. We only need 1 track now, but it's so much easier to go in later and add that 4th track. So we'll have that ability to think about the future. So if we can get a 4-track corridor from Spotsylvania all the way up to Washington, D.C., then we're separating passenger and freight trains. And this is laying that groundwork to be able to lay a 4-track corridor.
So there's currently 2 tracks, right? This isn't the one where CSX. What was the one where we said CSX is building the track? That wasn't the.
The Alexandria 4 tracks. CSX is building. They're building the 4-track up in just.
Okay, not this one. Okay.
And also Franconia section in the same area. They're building a 3rd track there as well.
CSX.
CSX is yes. So VPRA is leading. That's why I just presented the bypass.
I got you.
CSX is leading procurement on the
Yes.
track on the ground south of here. Correct?
Yeah, so the projects overlap. CSX is doing the entire corridor. We are doing the bypass bridge project. So that's where I was showing the 6-mile corridor. That's what CSX is doing.
And we're doing the bypass.
We're doing the bypass bridge inside of that envelope.
Thank you. Yeah.
During negotiations, CSX said they don't plan on using this. That's why we are procuring and constructing this.
The bypass.
The bypass. Just like the new Long Bridge, other than maintenance or emergency, they don't really plan on using. Similar here. So that's some of the rhyme or reason as to why VPRA is leading some projects and CSX is leading some others. They plan to just continue through here. This will be used mostly by passenger trains.
CSX will still own Long Bridge?
No, CSX, well, yes, CSX will own the current Long Bridge.
Yes, I know. Okay.
We will own the
VPRA
new one.
will own the new Long Bridge.
Okay,
2.0.
Yeah, 2.0, exactly. 2 tracks, coverage 2.0.
Technically, it's 3.0, but that's too much history. But go ahead.
yeah. So that will be a VPRA asset when completed.
This will be a VPRA asset, or which will be a VPRA asset. For the rest of the corridor, we will purchase half the corridor, the east half south of Franconia, the west half north of Franconia. And it aligns with the stations that Jeff laid out as well. We own some of the stations. So there's a rhyme or reason as to why we own half, they own half, and why we own half south of Franconia is because that's where trains are primarily going to run. And the east half south of Franconia and the west half north of Franconia. I say our trains, it's a collective.
Right.
theory.
And this is where we're switching from that west to the east side. That's what this is all about. We own the west side north, east side south, and this is getting from one side to the other without that bottleneck.
Those agreements are perfectly clear.
Yes.
Just to get technical for a moment too, this rendering also gives a good idea of what the structure is going to look like. We have parts where the flyover track is clear of the ground level tracks, and that's where we have a pretty conventional bridge structure with transverse concrete piers with longitudinal girders and a bridge deck. Where it gets interesting is where that third, future fourth track do crisscross with the tracks that are on the ground level. And that's where we actually flip the orientation. We are going to build the piers longitudinally and parallel to the track, and we're going to set the girders across perpendicular to the track so that we can build a deck that allows the track to go across. This is called a tunnel-like structure. I know a tunnel person would tell me absolutely not. That's not what it is for safety purposes and whatnot. But it is tunnel-like in the sense that the overhead structure is closed and it's creating that sort of effect.
But does that mean the freight can never be double stacked?
Good question. We are working within CSX's clearance requirement of 23.
So many trains are double stacked today, and I was looking at the picture going, well, is CSX ever going to be up top? Sorry.
Rarely. They are going to use the ground level tracks. The bypass is meant for that.
And they know that would prohibit them from double stacking?
I wouldn't say that it prevents them. They have their requirements that we're building within their clearance requirements.
Pictures.
Give me the pictures.
Pictures show.
I think that on the picture.
Okay.
It'll be high, not from scale.
The rendering is out of scale. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I feel better because I didn't think you wanted to do that.
No, because we have to build this within CSX's standards. So they would certainly have said something if they didn't want that.
You might want to ask them.
Yes.
No, asked you.
For our agreements, we have to allow for double stack clearance the whole way. That's why no election.
Okay, so it's just a bad picture. Good. Thank you.
The last thing I'll mention too is, I did mention that we are in a fairly secluded wooded area. We also have some pretty significant slopes on the west side of the corridor. So we do have some excavation and retaining walls that have to be built along the western side of the corridor. In addition to the flyover bridge and the retaining walls and the track that we mentioned, we also have to install crash walls at each of the piers to prevent impact from derailment or something else coming off of the tracks. We have earthwork and environmental controls to do throughout the project in the corridor. We also have a package of early enabling work that has to get done, and we're currently going through final design on right now. We do not have all the geotechnical information that we need from the project footprint. So we're going to be creating an early package that we do some site clearing, get the designer in there with their drill rigs so they can do more borings and we can finalize that design. We're expecting that work to start as soon as January. With all of that scope said, we have a number of significant requirements or constraints on the project. We have to maintain railroad traffic through the corridor at all times. This is the RF&P corridor. It's one of the busiest on the East Coast. 70 trains per day. We have to minimize any impact that we're going to have during construction. Of course, we will have some outages at times. We will need flaggers and support from CSX, but we do need to minimize our impact to the current passenger and freight operations, which is going to be a really heavy lift for this project. We need to coordinate with the two projects I mentioned before with VRE and with CSX. We all have to work within that same small footprint and same access points. We had some in-person meetings just 2 weeks ago to sort of work through that. figure out where those access points are, who needs to go first, what the sequence looks like. We also have a significant petroleum pipeline that goes to the corridor, as well as some fiber optic lines that need to be relocated through CSX. And we have a tight schedule, we have an ambitious schedule to meet substantial completion by the end of calendar year 2026, so that we can meet the commitments of TRV Phase 1. We also have a number of stakeholder agreements and stakeholders for the project. As always, we have our funding partners with FRA and NVTA. We have adjacent property owners like WMATA, Fairfax County Parks Authority. We have residents up and down the corridor on both sides. And of course, we have permitting authorities like the Corps of Engineers and the Virginia DEQ. So with all that said, the question is, or the question was last year, how do we deliver a project of this magnitude within cost and budget constraints and all of the requirements that I just mentioned? We could go with the traditional design bid build model that's been used for generations in American construction transportation systems, where we have a contract with the designer and a separate contract with the contractor. If we followed design bid build, we would never meet that 2026 deadline. It's a very linear process in design bid build. It gets pretty drawn out, getting a design to 100% and then bid, and then having that contractor mobilize their resources and their equipment and materials after bidding. The other problem with design bid build too is it tends to follow a low bid model. In the case of bypass, we need to select for value. We need to have a contractor that has experience with large structures, has experience with railroad bridges, understands working with and around freight and passenger rail, and can leverage those lessons learned and that experience to the project. We could try design build like we're doing on long bridge projects. Again, the value and the benefits you get from design build, where a contractor takes on the design responsibility and construction responsibility, we just don't see that as beneficial to the bypass. We have a designer that's been on board since the DRPT days, has a lot of experience on this project, understands the constraints, has worked through all the different variants and alternatives, and we're currently scoping them for final design. And if we went to design build, we would essentially be reprocuring a designer and bring on a new engineer of record, which would lose us some time. We would also be transferring all that construction and design risk onto a design builder. And given all the constraints we have, whether it's working with railroad operations, the tight schedule, the footprint that we're in, a design build contract could very quickly become contentious and adversarial, and we would end up in a loop of change orders and claims and delays and those things. We want to get this project moving and built. So we looked at the CMGC model, or Construction Management at Risk, or CMAR, as it's also known in the industry, where we do maintain a contract with a designer and we have a contract with a contractor. The difference is we bring that contractor on early during the final design stages to work collaboratively with the designer, come up with a plan that's going to work given the constraints that we have, and then go to work once we can meet construction price. So I'll go into a little bit more of the detail. That decision was made, I believe it was late last year in 2022. I wasn't part of that because I wasn't here, but I'm totally on board with it. It would have had my vote, and I'm excited to be part of it. In terms of timeline, this, just for comparison, would be a design bid build project. Like I mentioned earlier, very linear. You take design to 100%, you do a low bid process, you bring on a contractor, and move with construction. The timeline in CMGC, it has some similarities to design bid build. We have a contract with the designer. We'll be taking it to 100%. We will be having a GC contractor coming and building the job. But in this case, we're actually moving that contractor procurement to the left. We're bringing them on board to help with final design, the 60, 90, 100% design phase, which we call phase one of the contract. And they're going to be working with us, like I said, in that collaborative capacity. When we finish 60% design, we'll start talking about what the project has to construct. And we go through a series of negotiations on what we call the guaranteed maximum price, which is the price that we're going to agree to actually build the project. And once we narrow in on a GMP that's acceptable to all parties, we execute phase two, which is the construction contract. So the CMGC then loses that CM designator and becomes a contractor like they would on any other project. The red line here shows our estimate of where we are in the process right now. We're finalizing the procurement, ready to enter into phase one by the end of this year, calendar year. A little bit more on the process. The crux of CMGC is that phase, the value you get and the value you leverage from a contractor during phase one. We want to bring all their resources to bear to mitigate our risks, to bring costs down, to meet a schedule, and to work within all those constraints that I mentioned that we have. They're going to do that by performing constructability reviews of the design. They're going to bring innovations to the table that are going to facilitate constructability, that are going to bring cost and schedule within our what we need. And they're going to work with CSX. They're going to see, what can we do? How do we build things? What kind of flagger support do we need? What kind of outages might we need? And what might that look like? And that allows them to help us put together a constructible and feasible plan. Another thing that is really important in phase 1, too, is material sourcing. I've experienced this before with CMGC. There's no better, entity to work with when you're trying to figure out construction materials than a contractor. They're very close to their suppliers and vendors. They have folks that study the market. They know where shortages are, both regionally and nationally. And that's been a big problem the last few years of construction, is availability of materials. So we're going to rely on them to understand what's needed. It needs to be ordered well in advance so that we're not, that materials don't become a problem. They don't become a critical path item for us. And then we also expect that CMGC contractor to support us in that early work that I mentioned, to help do some of that site clearing so that we can finalize the design on the geotechnical side. The other key piece of CMGC is that there is always a plan B. We are not obligated to move to phase 2 construction with a CMGC contractor. We're going to be bringing an independent cost estimator on board to work for VPRA that'll be doing bottom-up estimates in parallel to that CMGC. So when we get to the GMP proposal phase, we have another set of eyes that's looking on it and doing a sanity check on the proposals that we're getting from the contractor. We're going to have to iterate that process through many meetings, I'm sure. But the intent is to get to a mutually agreeable price that we can execute the phase 2. But if we can't, we are by all rights able to go out, end our relationship with the CMGC, and then put that plan and put that design back out to market and reprocure design. The benefits that we'll get: constructible, feasible design. Really, the overarching principle of CMGC is that the best entity to plan a complicated construction project is the one that's going to build it. It's going to give us time savings on the procurement. We're going to get some cost certainty through that GMP, and it should also reduce our change order load and our claim load, because they're going to have been on the project with us for time during the construction phase. It's going to help us build our team and our relationships early on. And we also have some assurances in our draft contract that allows, that makes sure that the team that's with us in phase 1, working with the designer in phase 1, will be the team that builds the project in phase 2. I know Winnie talked about our procurement process, where we've been so far, and I'll call some of the dates. As we mentioned before, we had a draft RFP that went out to industry. We had a lot of good one-on-one meetings with proposers back in July that allowed us to tailor both our final RFP that went out as well as our draft contract. I know we mentioned August 1st earlier, it was actually August 1st. No big deal. The proposers are currently working through their proposals right now. You see the key evaluation criteria that we're expecting. And we expect to get proposals in pretty soon and have interviews with them. To put a couple more dates, we're expecting September 11th for proposals to come in. We have interviews that are going to be scheduled on October 10th. We intend to announce the selected proposer, or the top-ranked proposer, on October 20th. And then we'll negotiate an agreement that we hope to bring to the board sometime in November, like I mentioned, with phase 1 notice to proceed to take place soon after that. We also need to bring our ICE on board, our independent cost estimator, which we plan to do by the end of this year or early next year. With that said, I'll give you one more rendering looking to the north. Again, at our structure as it tends to be, but I know we're pressed for time, so if there are any questions, happy to entertain any more.
All right, so we have two actions before us relative to this project. The first pertains to, and this is something that we talked about earlier, pre-VPRA, DRPT applied for funding for the bypass through the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority that was awarded to DRPT. We want to get out of the middle of that and have that money and that relationship directly from NVTA to VPRA. So the first action is to authorize VPRA to receive that funding that was originally awarded to DRPT, and we've worked out legally between the agencies how to make that transfer happen. The second action that's necessary is the approval of an application for additional NVTA funding for the project. So we'll take looking at Westerman to make sure I got all that right. All right. So first action is recommendation to authorize VPRA to receive the NVTA grant funding for this project that was originally awarded to DRPT.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hall, second by Ms. Bulova. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none, Mary Stell, can you do a roll call?
Ms. Bulova?
Aye.
Ms. Bushu?
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch?
Aye.
Ms. Drake?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moses Ned?
Aye.
Mr. Payne?
Aye.
Ms. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Spohr?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Second action is an approval of a application with the NVTA for the Franconia-Springfield Passenger Rail Bypass project for the regional funding solicitation and their 6-year program, fiscal year 24 through 29. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Motion by Ms. Bulova.
Second.
Second by Ms. Moses Ned. Any discussion on that action item? All right, hearing none. Mary Stell, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bulova?
Aye.
Ms. Bushu?
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch?
Aye.
Ms. Drake?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moses Ned?
Aye.
Mr. Payne?
Aye.
Ms. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Spohr?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. Next item on our agenda is our regular update on passenger rail service performance. I actually have another commitment at 3 o'clock, so I will depart at some point and hand the gavel to Ms. Bulova to close us out for the day.
Jeremy Ladner, Director of Rail Services. So I want to talk about how our services are doing and also how we're going to coordinate with all of the construction you've heard about today. So what we do at VPRA, we coordinate with CSX, VRE, and Amtrak on a regular basis on service and how we can manage those services. We're primarily focused on that Metro, Petersburg, and Arlington, Washington, where all the north services go on Andrea. Then the western services also come in and out, and everything goes into Washington. So we'll talk about VRE, Amtrak performance, and then we'll go into some deeper dives on some of the data of the data telling us. Starting with VRE, so the goal is the 90% on-time performance target. We have been hovering below that, and July was a rough month for VRE and Amtrak. And Mr. Dalton, if you want to take a few minutes to say anything, welcome you.
Well, just to point out the obvious, going back to previous information, if you look at May and then you look at July, both of those were, generally or specifically incidences caused at Washington Union Terminal that, we had to cancel and terminate a lot of trains. So at a high level, those are pretty evident. We've started, we actually haven't recovered too well in the month of August, but
There's a number
see what happens
out there in addition to
that. But those are two very dominant things that occurred in both of those months.
Right, and the bars in this chart reflect the delay minutes total, so the red representing the Manassas line and the blue the Fredericksburg line. So we do track certain things and or we look at the data for what the significant and impactful delays out there are. Amtrak interference is one of the top delays, and I'll say Amtrak interference is often symptomatic of something else that's going on because those trains are out of slot. So that's the conductor saying what's in front of them, what's causing this current delay. Might have been something that happened earlier in the day, Slow orders are actually coming down. That's some good news. There's been a lot of work out there over the summer months. CSX interference, another symptom of some delays, and terminal congestion in Washington Union Station is a big problem that we will talk more about later in the slides. And I'm moving fast because I know we are late in the day here. So looking at Amtrak performance, Amtrak had a very rough month. These are the Northeast regionals. These are the services that Virginia contracts for. So we're extending services that would have otherwise terminated at Union Station into Virginia, down to Norfolk, Newport News, Richmond, and Roanoke. So our performance in July was the lowest since we started tracking this. It was at 48.1%. Our trains are typically higher performing trains with shorter distances going into the Northeast. And I'll also point out here on this slide that July 2022 was when we added services. So you see that 10,000 is kind of like more trains, more delays. So it's just the number is higher because of the higher trains out there. But July and August, it looks like we'll also be a struggling month. The long distance trains, they travel longer distances. They cover multiple host railroads. They are known for having more chances for delays and poorer performance than our Virginia trains. They also had a rough month, 80% still their on-time performance target, but in July was 33%. So one thing I just want to take a second to look at is when we talk about what the federal standard is for on-time performance, it's customer on-time performance. What's the percentage of customers getting to their destination on time, which by Amtrak standards is within 15 minutes of scheduled arrival. So the blue, the orange, the navy blue, those are the customer on-time performance of the various routes that come through Virginia. But what I wanted to look at in this chart, that 80% dotted line that goes across the top, if we look at the trains that came within 30 minutes of their scheduled arrival, then we start to see that a lot of the trains are getting closer to the 80%. The reason I wanted to take a moment to show this slide is to show that if you don't meet your on-time performance, it's not like the entire trip fell apart, right? I just want to show order of magnitude. There still are a high number of trains getting into Washington when you look at it 30 minutes or better. Into their destination. You can see the long distance route going north. Again, those trains coming from longer distance outside the Northeast, they're coming on multiple freight railroads and have more chances for delay. So those are the ones that particularly suffer as they come into Virginia. Looking at the Amtrak delays, slow orders have been affecting them. There has been more track work south of the VPRA territory that has continued to affect Amtrak trains. Weather delays, I'll mention weather delays in that we have heat orders, which I'll talk about more in a second. That's really warmer months and temperature swings. But also there was a lightning strike at Washington Station that caused the power outage. It was about 1,800 minutes of delay in July, so that was a significant event. And then again, Amtrak and freight interference are symptomatic of some other issues. So heat orders are something that railroads, there are warm months, warm temperatures out there, and also swings in temperatures. CSX has a policy that affects the RFP. We are tracking that data. Last year we tracked it, and we're comparing it now to this year. So some months, look at April. So April, we had 2,500 minutes of delay this year versus 266 last year. So this year has been worse for April, but better for May. July was also worse this year, and it looks like August will also be worse this year. We're tracking this because given what I'm going to talk about in just a second on construction, this is one of the existing challenges that are out there for up to 5 months out of the year. You can even see when we have warm spells in February, we have heat order delays. That was this year. Yeah. The Washington Union Station, there are a significant number of initiatives going on there right now. The lightning strike caused a significant amount of delay last month. This is looking at southbound trains. This is the trains that come into Virginia. If they don't get out of Washington on time, they do not have a very good chance for on-time performance as they continue south, and especially in that Northern Virginia congested area. So the derailment was also significant, but we've been having, we've noticed that the data showing the equipment swaps are not happening on time. That's partly because there is a shortage of engines right now. Many engines have been damaged or are in the repair process. I guess good news on that front is there are some new engines that are supposed to start showing up as early as next month that will help some of the long distance trains. So that's some good news on the horizon. Also still struggling with crews. If crews come in on late trains and then they're supposed to serve on other trains, or if we don't have enough crews, there are delays continuing at Washington Union Station. And if you look at the delays here on the left-hand column, the right-hand column are some of the trains that are affected. So the bubble, all the odd number trains outside the bar. those are all southbound train numbers coming out of Washington. You can see it's a handful of trains that are getting hit hardest. It's most of those long distance. And trying to move quickly here, we looked at what the conductors are citing in their notes. And so it really has to do with those engine swaps, the crews, mechanical and PTC issues. And so what we did, we went up to Washington Union Station for a site visit with many purposes in mind, but one of them was to see the engine change process. Now, Amtrak knew we were there, so they put on their best show possible, and that day was a good day. But it is a very complicated process. Those trains are packed full. These platforms are full of people boarding the trains, alighting, and then you have crews out there, and they have to line up their locomotives, get them into the tunnel, bring them back, and you can see the lady here is monitoring and having the train as it backs in to connect. So there's just a lot of impressive work that goes into this, and with the crew shortages, there are a lot of people that are working very hard to do their best to keep things going. So it's really interesting. And we also learned that Amtrak, because we've been talking to them about this, Amtrak has come up with a metric just for Washington Union Station, just to measure the engine change. So we are talking to them about what that looks like, but that is getting reported to the executive leadership team because they're very aware of this problem in Washington. But without that data, because it's kind of new, we look at our own data. And so one of the things we're seeing, and we're using K91, which is the Silver Star, it's a southbound Silver Star. You can see at Washington Union Station in May, it arrived 90% on time. In June, it arrived 93% on time. In July, 83% on time. That's pretty good. But when it gets into Alexandria, 77%, 83%, and then 52%. We're seeing that getting out of Union Station is that problem for trains that are coming in on time. And 10 of the times it came in July on time into Washington, it came out late into Virginia. So this is symptomatic of what we're seeing for many trains. So ask me questions if you have any, but I'm going to keep moving into something different about how we're going to start looking forward with all the construction coming online. So everything we just looked at is kind of said there's challenges out there. There's heat orders, there's issues at Washington Station. But we know upcoming there are large-scale construction projects that are going to have some impacts on our tracks and speed restrictions. And without some proactive coordination with the engineering teams, we're concerned about what that can mean for service. So we've been tracking data for slow orders by segment: Washington, Control Point, Virginia, Alexandria, down to Richmond. And this is 6 months of showing the slow orders and the delays because of that by segment. So this is our baseline. CSX is going to have to do inspections all the time. They're going to have to do track work. There's going to be some level of work going on no matter what we do in addition to this maintaining of tracks. So using the baseline of slow orders, so we know that work's going to be out there at all year long, and it'll vary throughout the year. We have to plan around that. Right now, things are pretty quiet when it comes to construction. So we say that the tie projects between Fredericksburg and Ashland, there was a tie project up on the Long Bridge, and then we had a crossing project. But we want to know what do we know like when we get into some construction phase transforming rail in Virginia. So we're going to try and categorize it: minimal, minor, moderate, major impacts. And in 2024, we know there's going to be some early works on the Long Bridge. We're expecting that to be fairly minor. We know that the Lorton third track and Alexander fourth track, the coordination with engineering we're doing right now, we expect it to be minimal in 2024. We're always monitoring that. Things can change. But we also expect Arkansas to be wrapping up, and there will be a lot of track work. And so we expect some moderate impacts to service slow orders through that area. 2025, we expect the construction to pick up, so we're going to see more moderate level impacts to service. And so this is something we have to keep monitoring and work with our construction teams to know how long will that last, what's expected, what's the expected impact, what other projects are existing, so we're not just adding to a problem that we're already trying to contend with. And then what do we do about it once we determine the impact? So we need to make sure we're communicating well with customers. That is our goal. We also want to look at possibilities of rescheduling work activities if we're going to really affect the network by turning off the construction project or going into a certain phase of construction. We are considering schedule changes to make sure that we set customer expectations. They know when they're going to get to their destination and not always have to be late. And we really don't want to do cancellations, but we are talking with Amtrak. We do know that they have work in the Northeast, and it is possible there will be outages. So that was going through what we're doing to look forward. And one thing I mentioned in previous meetings was that we were tracking train 99. So I'm just going to say real quick, it's train 99. Our bellwether train is a southbound Newport News weekend train that has struggled more than some of the other trains. And we are seeing that train is getting into Washington better. But in 2022, it was that poor performer. We talked with Amtrak in December of 2022. January, we saw a real effort. January was a good month overall for performance. We saw it improve. But then as we see this continuing to get into Washington better, we're seeing getting out of Washington continues to be a struggle as this train continues to backslide on its performance. So looking at that bellwether train, we'll continue to work on that. And hopefully the benefits will benefit other trains as well.
Thank you, Jeremy. A lot of good information. So any questions for Jeremy? And then the last slide of the meeting is just the upcoming dates.
Another question. Jeremy, did you say, so did I see a slide up there when you said the Amtrak train kind of left on time from Union Station, but was heavily delayed in Alexandria? Is that because of Long Bridge?
There is a track, or there is a tie replacement project on Long Bridge that has some slow orders, but also it's the activity in Union Station, the switching of engines, not having enough crews, that is causing a lot of delays.
One other very quick point, Jeremy mentioned it, actually tomorrow there's a meeting amongst the engineering staff and the service planning staff. Coordinate future projects that are going construction and what it'll mean for passengers and travel times. Because if we know Alexandria Fort Track is going to start construction next spring, we want to communicate to passengers. People just want to know if it's going to be 10 minutes longer for 2 years, 3 years, they want to know that. They want to be able to plan accordingly. So we're actually bringing together the engineers often talk each month and the service planning team often talks. We're bringing the group together tomorrow in Alexandria, which is the VPRA team's part of that, Amtrak team's part of that. They're showing up. Officers showing in person, some CSX showing in person, some are via the phone. So that coordination is happening as well. In addition to all the analysis Jeremy has, we know we're going to have future impacts to service.
I had just one quick question. It's actually VRA centered. Rich, I saw what President a couple of weeks ago was calling for the feds to get their butts back in the office, and I thought of you.
Yeah.
What do you, with respect to your ridership projections and what that portends for the agency itself? Like, what do you feel? I know it's pretty loaded, but I'm just...
let me just say this. Obviously, throughout the year, there's been a couple of pushes by the administration to get federal workers back. We haven't really seen that. So let's just be optimistic, cautiously, if you will, to see how that materializes. I mean, our ridership continues to increase slowly, gradually, if you will. You know, our August numbers are coming in. We're 25% above where we were last August, right? So we continue to show that.
Sure.
But I'll just have to say, to be honest with you, we need to wait and see what happens because, again, there's been a push to do this. It just hasn't materialized yet. Yeah.
Other questions for staff?
I just want to add, from the Washington Union Terminal standpoint, didn't want to, walk out of here with us all jumping off of I'll just leave it at that. But there's another point of light at the end of the tunnel on or about October 1st. They are projecting to have track 22 in service, which on the lower level, we have been operating without track 22 for a couple of years. So adding an additional track in there with an additional platform for us will help us on the capacity side. So there's that to look forward to, in addition to some new locomotives as well. So
Going to end on that happy note.
try.
I say we should.
With that, and so our next meeting date for the full meeting, our full board is December 6th. And we will see you then, if not sooner, for whatever other activities we're going to be engaging in. So with that, our meeting is adjourned.